So welcome back. This is Night Flight, and today James Bartley is back, and yeah, we will have an interesting conversation, I guess. And so, James, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you, Judith. Pleased to be here.
Yeah. So one thing, what I always, not always, but I recently try to figure out, because sometimes we hear people saying that they have been recruited by the FBI when they came out of university. Yeah. So I tried to figure out how that works, but I really couldn't. Yeah. Usually what you get is, okay, here's how you apply. A master's degree would be nice, and you should have worked in your field of expertise for at least 3 years. Of course, no criminal record, and so on and so forth. So, but how does that work? I can't imagine that the FBI is cruising through the universities all the time. So that would mean, according to my logic, that the professors somehow are in it. Or how do you have any idea how that functions?
If it's anything like the way the CIA and the NSA recruit, it's a similar process where we have these professors in the various um, subjects, and there's a certain psychological profile that they look for, certain age range, certain level of intelligence, and then, based on the kind of feedback they get from, the prospect, the potential recruit, and then they gradually recruit them into the process. They may encourage them to take certain field of study, whatever the case may be. And I really think at this point, and for some time now, psychological profiles have a lot to do with it. They want a certain type of mentality, a control freak mentality, and definitely within their own inner circle, so to speak, they will definitely recruit certain types of people to do the black ops, to do the real dirty work, and they look for a certain specific psychological profile to do all that type of stuff, the black bag jobs, etc.
Okay. How do you feel about that? That professors are, being used as a tool to do the recruiting for a certain agent. I don't have a good feeling when I hear you.
No, I don't, because they're siphoning off what should be the best and the brightest of society, who could be doing, useful things elsewhere, but instead they're pulled into the intelligence and security field. There's a good book about the OSS recruitment process in World War II. I forget the title of it, but basically it was about how the OSS and also its counterpart, the British Special Operations Executive, they relied on professors in America. It would be the Ivy League colleges and some of the other types of major universities, and in Britain, the so-called Oxbridge universities, Cambridge, Oxford, and then also they look for the right kind of preparatory schooling, Eton, and some of these other types of schools where they know they're going to get a certain type of product, certain type of mentality, ideally from the aristocracy, the ruling class, but increasingly the last 20 years or so, and especially with all the multicultural diversity going on, they're just pulling in people from all walks of life who fit a certain psychological profile, and then they slot them into some field, whether it's communications, the media, whatever the case may be. But they're trained and they're tasked by intelligence and security services, but really, they work for the security services. So we're seeing a lot of that and have been for some time. It's really, unfortunate that it's gone in that direction.
Yeah. So what do you make of the Republican investigation into the Biden family? Do you think there's something will come out of it, or is it just another distraction?
Well, a lot of people were wondering if there's going to be some big event leading up to the midterm elections. That didn't happen. But right after that announcement went out, just today, there was an allegedly, and I have no way to verify this because I wasn't there, this mass shooting event once again, Colorado Springs, Colorado. This time, once again, it was a LGBTQ gay club, right? So, and I'll talk more about this in a moment in this connection, like you discussed at the outset with the FBI and other security services. As far as the investigation, it depends on how much teeth the investigation has. If they're making serious inroads, what's the likelihood of the people doing the investigating of getting intimidated, harassed, embarrassed? Because we saw all this with the Supreme Court. They were supposed to settle the bogus election, uh, you know, several months back, a year or so by now. That went nowhere because the Supreme Court justices who they assumed, excuse me, like I said, I've got a cold. The the Supreme Court justices, which were Republican, they just assumed that they would vote to discount and nullify the election results. That didn't happen. These people that were Trump appointees wound up voting in favor of, certifying the election. So if these people are making progress, they are making headway, and then the inevitable harassment, attempts at blackmail, uh, bribes, etc. Will they be able to overcome that? Will they be able to withstand that? That's the important thing. And I'm always hopeful. I hope that uh, it's not going to be publicized. This controlled media will not. If anything, they'll just make a joke out of it. So uh, it's going to be have to be through the alternative media that people find out about this. But I'm always hopeful. But getting back also to the shooting that supposedly took place, I can easily see now how any criticism whatsoever of the LGBT community, of all the pedo grooming, etc., any criticism of that can be construed as hate speech, as domestic terrorism, extremism, etc. We already saw this when Obama was in office. Somebody makes a joke about Obama on the internet, and the next thing you know, the feds are showing up at the person's door. Okay, so we already know that these control freak Democrats, they've so politicized excuse me, the legal system, right? They've got all their in the key positions, they've got all their perps and all their control freaks in there, right? So let's see how it plays out. People are going to make a point of saying this shooting happened right after, just days after the Republicans announced they're going to do an investigation. And one of the things they're going to investigate, supposedly, is the Biden family's involvement in human trafficking, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, they're that's pretty hardcore. I never thought I'd see that, right? So let's see how this plays out. Well, one can always be hopeful. There's nothing wrong with hoping that we have some kind of positive outcome about this, but the timing of this mass shooting event, just days after the Republicans announced they're going to do an investigation, that to me is very fishy.
Mhm. Yeah. So, and another thing recently happened. The judge, Loretta, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot her name, but she decided that the court documents of 8 Jeffrey Epstein acquaintances will now be unsealed.
Yes, I heard that. I don't know the details, but I've heard of that. Yes.
Mhm. So that will be very interesting as well, what we will hear about it. And yeah, but do you think that's another hopeful, at least a hopeful sign?
Well, yes, that finally a
Mm.
concerted effort, a group effort is being made to expose this. And that's the thing about America, that there is, to use a word that's really been misused lately, there's a lot of diversity as far as local politics, local justice, what have you. And the places that are not as Democrat, Luciferian controlled, you have the opportunity for these kinds of investigations to play out, right? So the fact that this judge had decided to unseal the names of 8 of the people that were at some level involved with Epstein, I can only see that as a positive development. And the great work that Whitney Webb has done regarding the Epsteins, the Clinton connection, Lex Wexner, I think his name was.
Mm.
And she makes the point, and I would agree with her, that this kind of network has existed all along, that the Epsteins of the world, the Ghislaine Maxwells of the world, they're not the kingpins. They're gophers working at the operational level. That there's somebody jerking their strings. They just happen to be evil and, fulfill some kind of recruiting criteria. And clearly, Ghislaine Maxwell grew up into this. Her father being Robert Maxwell, and also clearly Epstein had been involved in nefarious activities for a long time. And Whitney Webb points out that it tracks back to MIT, to Harvard, and now we're finding out with this FTX connection that Jeffrey Epstein even had a role in the whole development of this whole Bitcoin type of phenomena that we've seen. So again, just to kind of put it in perspective, these are mid-level players at best, but the fact that they can operate at that level, be protected for so long, my feeling is there is some element of within the patriot community, in law enforcement, in the various state, local, federal bureaucracies, if you will, that are just fed up with this. They just see where it's going, that if they don't try to do something, at least make an effort to turn this thing around, they just would have to live with the shame of not doing anything about it, right? So to me, that likewise is a positive development.
Okay. Yeah, here they have the judiciary neatly in their pockets. Just the other week, the court ruled that our health minister, he's allowed to spread lies. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, there's somebody, they sued him for the fact that he kept saying there are absolutely no side effects to the jamba juice. Yeah. And but the court was of the opinion, no, that's perfectly okay. He can say that. Yeah. So, I mean, if your judiciary is so compromised as it is here, what chance do you have? What is left? Nothing.
Yes, I mean, there's no legal means to do anything about it. One can only hope, like I said, that the judge unsealing those 8 case files and the impending or ongoing investigation into the Biden crime syndicate, right? That something positive comes out of that. If nothing else, if more people, the man on the street, the woman on the street, if they become aware at some level that this is going on, right? I mean, I'm not going to get overly ambitious and just hope that everything gets turned around and they all get arrested and sent off to Guantanamo Bay. I don't see that happening anytime soon, right? But because we've seen in other major criminal investigations how they were derailed, how key witnesses were intimidated, bought off, bumped off, especially at that level of criminality. The drug smuggling, the arms smuggling, the human trafficking, the corruption of the local, state, federal judiciary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's very difficult for people to get justice at that level. But like I said, the fact that they're even opening investigations, making inroads in that direction is, to me, a positive development. I think that those people, they want to be seen as being on the right side of history, be seen with the people. The control system is such, though, that we know what they do to witnesses. We know what they do to even well-meaning people, attorneys, what have you, that they get threatened, their families get threatened.
Yeah, yeah. And there, especially next year, there are some, let's say cosmic events that might support that. I just recently did an interview with Wendy Cicchetti, and Saturn, for instance, is moving into Pisces, meaning Saturn cannot function there. Yeah, it's not Saturn sign. So you could say, in a way, Saturn is dead in the water. So the thing that the tension between Uranus and Saturn, that we had during 2020, and then it came back in 2021, that is gone. Also, Pluto will move into Taurus in March, and but then we'll go into Aquarius. Sorry, not Taurus, Aquarius, and but then we'll go retrograde for a while, and then at the end of 2024 it will settle in Aquarius. And Pluto always brings along these revolutionary energies. When we look back 248 years, during that period, we had the American Revolution, we had the French Revolution, and so on and so on. So there are a lot of, let's say, energies that can be helpful to us if we know how to use them. So now is not the time to drop the ball. Yeah.
Yeah, you look at just Pluto. I've had Bernard Gunther and others who are familiar with astrology on the show, and they talked about the deconstructive aspects of Pluto and the fact that Saturn, which is all about control of time, control of monetary systems, et cetera, that it will start to lose its power to impose its will, if you will. And another thing that people need to remember is a lot of people tend to think that it's all one monolithic block, that everyone at every level that's of that temperament of authoritarianism, control, tyranny, and whatever kinds of perversions and heinous behaviors they get up to, that yes, they're all united in the fact that they do evil things, right? But within that dynamic, there will be what's left of nation states who certain politicians at certain levels, certain bureaucrats at certain levels will look at each other and say, if they can find a like-minded spirit, a like-minded personality, right? Yeah, it's all well and good, this great reset, but when the grid goes down and when people are freezing and there's no food, they're not going to riot at Klaus Schwab's house. They're going to riot here, right? So at some level, there will be some degree of self-interest, if nothing more than to continue their hegemony, continue their scam, continue their corporate empire. And we saw how certain German industries wanted to maintain a connection with Russia. But what do they do? We now know the British, right? Probably the British Special Boat Service is my guess, played some role in sabotaging, Nord Stream, right? And there's also a knock-on effect because Iran and Saudi Arabia were historic enemies. But now, because everyone's moving away from the petrodollar, right? You have the Saudis and the Iranians essentially on the same financial side of moving away from the petrodollar, wanting to be part of the BRICS and uh, that whole Belt and Road initiative, and even a country for a long time, which was a mainstay, not necessarily a part of NATO, but a big ally in the NATO scheme of things, Turkey. They're saying, oh, we're not too sure anymore about all this stuff because they saw what happened next door with Syria. You know, the Turks have been trying to suppress the Kurds all this time, right? Next thing you know, they're good buddies, NATO, the Israelis, the Americans, they're using Kurdish separatists um, in operations to destabilize and destroy Syria. I mean, that's just one of the things that was going on. And you have the control of El Nusra and et cetera, et cetera. Now Turkey, they don't want to see their country go the way of Syria or go the way of Libya and have the whole country overrun with these jihadists and what have you. So the point I'm making is that, yes, it may seem like a new world order. It may seem like a great reset, but within that dynamic, there are certain players in certain nation states to say, look, it's all well and good. We do this great reset, but we can come out of this with nothing. We can come out of this with a country overrun by jihadists, by people from the southern hemisphere. We won't have any life worth speaking of, right? Because if they're not part of the favored few, then they're not going to go, you know, given first class tickets to some underground bunker or given first class tickets to some off world destination. They're going to have to put up with all this stuff like the rest of us will. So I'm not hanging my hat on the notion that these people will just rise up and say, okay, we've had enough too. It's all about self interest with them. It's all about carving out their own niche, their own empire within this great reset structure. But some of them are realizing that, uh, you know, they weren't given the whole picture. They went along with a lot of these initiatives, the mass unlimited immigration for one, and then manipulating things in such a way, the powers that be manipulating things in such a way that Europe in general is going to be cut off from energy supplies, right? Already in the process. They're going to be left holding the bag. All these local bureaucrats, they thought they were part of the club. No, they're not part of the club. They're not. So some of them are finding out the hard way that they're not insiders by any means. They can be corrupt. They can be part of all this smuggling and trafficking and everything else. But some of them are finding out that they're not part of the favored few.
Yeah, and then we had the G20, and G20 came up with, next time around we will have international health certificates, QR codes, or whatever you want to call them. And interestingly enough, G20, that is something where Russia is still a part of. Of course, Putin didn't go, but Mr. Lavrov did. And they went along with it. Yeah.
Yeah, part of the criticism against, excuse me, Putin is, and it's a valid point, right? Now, at the G20, they did try to push through these measures, basically, accusing Russia of causing all these problems, affecting the distribution chains, et cetera, and the Russians weren't having any of that. But as far as this whole kind of control system, the passport system that you're talking about, right? Yes, they seem to be on board with that. Will they be permanently on board with that? At some point in the future, will they back off from that? We don't know. I hope they do. I hope they do, because as Karen Kingston and others have pointed out, a lot of these smart grids, smart cities, QR code things are being implemented in Russia, right? So there's different ways you can look at that. One is, okay, they're just going to do what everyone else is going to do. And I think that this is just my belief, and you talked about cosmic issues earlier. Going forward, 2025, heading towards 2030, the possibility exists that there will be some kind of celestially driven something, whether it's a cataclysm or a series of cataclysms, whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying this to justify or anything of that nature, but for whatever reason, at least at this point, Putin and others like him have decided, yes, we'll go along with that, right? Which that's never a good idea to want to bag and tag everybody and make them part of this big B system, even though it's only their B system, right? Because it goes completely against the grain as far as the Christian faith, and Russia is supposed to be a Christian country, and so why are people being injected essentially with what amounts to the mark of the beast, right? Now, again, and I'm not just whistling past the graveyard. I'm not ascribing these hidden altruistic motives to Putin or others like him, right? What we have seen in some of these nation states and in some of the state elections in America, where these people who one could say they went along with certain initiatives, certain measures that are definitely anti-American, anti-sovereignty, anti-freedom in general, but they went along with that long enough to get elected in certain key places, and now they're speaking up and saying we're against this anti-white racism replacement policy, we're against mass immigration, we're against all this mass genderization, if that's a word. So a lot of these people that some would regard as having a shady past. Oh, look at them, look at the affiliations, look at the organizations, look at the training they underwent, right? But in glass half full fashion, right? I look at it, they're in place now. If they had not gone along with some of these initiatives, they would never even have been on the election ballot, right? So it could be a case for, at least at the local and national level, of some of these politicians going along with certain New World Order, Great Reset types of initiatives. But when they get in, right, they're saying different things, and I'm willing to, I wouldn't say give them a free pass, but it's a wait and see approach, right? You look at Merloni in Italy. I mean, she's talking about what do they got against the family? Why do they have to have so many genders? Why do they have to have such mass immigration? It's destroying our national culture and identity. Those are not limited hangouts, because those are key planks of the white replacement New World Order agenda. And also, Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democrat, she's saying the same thing. There's an anti-white racist policy or replacement policy. You have the lady in Arizona who had the election stolen from her, and then they installed this whack job whose husband is apparently involved in all kinds of pedo grooming activities, funding, all that stuff openly, right? I would much rather have seen the other lady, Carrie Lake, get in there, because she was talking about these same issues. She's saying that perfectly healthy soccer players are falling down dead, on soccer fields all over the world. That's not a limited hangout, right? That strikes at the core of all this stuff. So I'm willing. Some people call me naive. It doesn't matter to me, but I'm willing to give these people a chance. Now, Kerry Lake is yet to get in because they cheated the election over there in Arizona. Of course, the country, that state is overrun with communists at all levels, right? So, getting back to Putin, I'm just hoping that he's going along with all these smart city grid QR control type things, just to buy time and get them off his back, right? Otherwise, if he resorts to that kind of control system after he's gotten the West to back off, then we'll know that he's really no better than them. It's what do you do
I think
to
I
your own?
already know that.
Yeah, it's what do you do for your own people? Okay, there's a great reset New World Order out there, but what do you do for your own people, right? That's to me, that's the most important thing. If the whole world goes to hell, right? But these people are still responsible for the people who voted them in, right? That's as far as I'm concerned. So let's see how that plays out.
Yeah. And even with Meloni, I take her with a huge sack of salt, I have to say. Yeah, one of her first tweets was um, total support for Ukraine, whatever it is, whatever you need, we are on your
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
Then she has connections to the Rockefeller Foundation. She has
It,
connections to the P2 Lodge. So,
yeah, it's a lot of them are like that. Like DeSantis, for example, he does
mm,
some things that are good. He didn't go along with the mandates, didn't go along with the
yeah.
restrictions. But on the other hand, right, he's all for putting this anti-hate crime legislation into effect, where you can't criticize certain countries or certain people, right?
Mm,
He put that in effect, and yeah, it's disappointing, but you take the good with the bad. In this world, I'm not naive enough to think that these are people that actually, want to be friends with and trust, even just on a personal level, right?
mhm,
But all one could do is hope that they're just not blowing smoke and that they're being guided by some higher power, right? And
mm,
even if they make all these pronouncements, pro this, pro that, pro transhumanism, and I don't have to know all the details, but if at least some of them that are doing that, at least if some of them are working behind the scenes to try to turn this thing around, more power to them, right? Uh, but it's just one of those things. The system is so rigged that they're gonna ensure that they have people in most positions that they can blackmail, coerce, manipulate at some level. So when somebody slips through the cracks, right, they still have this bureaucratic inertia that they have to work against, where they're just being thwarted and rebuffed from every direction to keep them from implementing a meaningful change. So yeah, but again, glass half full. I'm hopeful that there's a positive outcome from all this.
mm. So the two of us, we have talked about that ultimately, at the end of the day, there is a non-human influence here, whether people recognize that or not. And so, but in general, when we look at pop culture, let's say TV, movies, with few exceptions, the tale always goes like that: colonization, and then the establishment of, yeah, more or less a dictatorship run by aliens and human stooges in certain places. So, and I was wondering, why is that? Why is everybody so convinced that it will go down that way? Or is it just something to put people into fear?
You mean the notion that ultimately, and I would ascribe to this hypothesis, that ultimately this is an alien control system working through
Mm-hmm.
hybridized human minions to, the plantation managers to do the dirty work. There could be an element that people have called it predictive programming, and I call it kind of rubbing it in your face. But this notion where in their arrogance and they're operating from a place of ego, so many of them, that they have no qualms about putting the agenda out there. I mean, when you have drag drag queen story time guarded
Mm.
by heavily armed, I don't even know what these people are. Are they contractors? Are they police? Who are these people guarding them, right?
Mm.
When you have that, the sky's the limit. Everything that we've talked about, the whole Babylonian kind of underpinning to all this, the Draco Orion Babylonian underpinning, it used to be sub rosa under the surface, but now it's just so in your face. I think in their arrogance, and I think there's something to this, they feel that the level of muted consciousness across the board is such that they can put anything out there now, essentially admitting, yes, they've basically come out and said that they're a bunch of pedos and a bunch of truly evil people with all their legal initiatives, all the ballot measures they're putting up, right? So they're not trying to hide their nefarious activities anymore. They're at the stage where might makes right. This is what we're all about. If you don't like it, too bad. We're going to shoot you or throw you into a gulag somewhere. And they may be looking for the next pandemic outbreak, some other justification to bring out. Could be the climate. We already saw that in France, right? Where Macron basically shut down the country because he's so concerned about people getting sunburn, right? So we can see that in the works. And what they're already doing in so many countries already is they're injecting mRNA into beef cattle and probably other, probably in the poultry as well, and who knows what else. And the trend for a long time now is to make everything from a vegetable fruit perspective, everything GMO. So what's there that would be left that's natural, that's non-tainted, that's not, I mean, it was bad enough it was processed, a lot of this, like Walmart type food, let's say. But now with all these additives, let's say, that they're adding, changing us from the inside and out, I think that there's a big element, to get back to your question, there's a big element of terraforming. That's a big part of what the global dimming is about. That's a big part about what cutting down the forest is all about. A big part of making carbon dioxide our enemy instead of our ally. So all of that is being used because we talk about the great replacement of European heritage people, of white people, but it goes beyond that. I think that they may keep just enough heavily implanted, nanobot connected humans, they would probably be transhumans by that point, around, enough of them around to do the menial task, to run the machines, to clean up, and to be the objects of various sexual perversions and sadistic, attention, let's say. They'll keep enough of, I think their objective is to keep enough of them around and get rid of everyone else, because they see everyone else as pointless. They played this out long enough and they're ready for going to the next level of what their agenda is. So in their arrogance, I can see them, and they've been doing this for decades, since the 60s and 70s. All these dystopic, futuristic movies were coming out and TV shows were coming out. So the agenda was there all along in our face, but we tended to look at them as science fiction or some kind of fantastic tale. Now we see that they weren't just whistling Dixie. That's what they really intend. And so I think the next stage, like a lot of people feel, is the climate change agenda. They're really going to push that. And because they manipulate so much of the world's weather, and even amongst the abnormies and the muggles around me, I can hear them using the same talking points about climate change. Oh, this is due to climate change. That's due to climate change. So those people will be ready to accept any measures that the powers that be decide to impose upon them. They've proven already that they'll roll over and go along with whatever measures, however harsh, however restrictive. There's no reason to suppose they'll be any different next time around, because the muting of consciousness is such that they cannot sustain a thought in their head long enough to question any of this. And by this point, I'd also like to add, there's definitely not just the non-human element driving all this, but also the entity possession, the attached entity aspect. There definitely seems to be something about these treatments, so-called, which are causing people to be taken up as hosts, to be They undergo abrupt personality changes. You've probably seen the videos when people are like turning around and they see something scary and they're fighting it, then they drop dead. Just videos from all over the world now, from
Yeah.
CCTV cameras, et cetera, et cetera. And just to throw a thought out there, we know that what some of these covens do is say, like, if some pesky Christian moves into the neighborhood, oh, let's get him, right? So they get into their prayer circles, so-called, and they imbue all these demons and entities into an object. It could be a hairpin, it could be a piece of lint, whatever. It becomes a portal, and then they contrive to surreptitiously leave that in the house somehow, some way, breaking and entering or whatever, or visit for a cup of coffee. Let me use your toilet, right? And then they leave something in the bathroom, and that becomes an open portal. Pretty soon, entities, humanoids are showing up, and right. And then the coven members have a big laugh about that. Well, what seems to have happened is something along those lines within the ingredients of these treatments. Something within along those lines has been included into the ingredients. Excuse me. I'm reminded of, and I'm not saying it's this particular uh, uh, substance, but I'm reminded of iboga, the root that West Africans imbibe, and it allows them to see deceased ancestors, presumably their deceased ancestors, but also reports suggest they see like zombies, they see all kinds of demonic entities, what have you. They actually have come up with a pharmaceutical version of that, ibogaine, which they use to treat addictions. Go figure, right? So something like iboga or something even more sinister has been put in. And so now there is definitely an entity possession aspect to this. And when they crank up the 5G, I think that from an energetic perspective, some of these non-corporeal, interdimensional type entities, archontic, parasitic entities, they have a way of riding or piggybacking, if you will, certain frequencies. We know that in modern medicine for some time now, they can use sonic waves to insert certain medicines or chemicals or whatever into an individual, right? Presumably to a whole population, if you have enough power to generate such frequencies. But the potential exists that not only have they been plugged into this transhuman agenda, but the consciousness at times, which is guiding these people, is these archontic, parasitic, nefarious beings. And I believe that they will piggyback on the 5G, among other things. They may even be able to piggyback on increased radioactive radiation background if one or more nuclear weapons goes off, or spreads through the jet stream or whatever, right? It's the potential exists that some of these non-corporeal entities can ride that radioactive frequency wave right into people, right? So let's see how that plays out. But I think at this point, they don't care if they tell us exactly what they're doing. They know that the level of consciousness is at all-time low for so many people. But that much being said, a lot of people are waking up to at least the basic level of this manipulation.
Yeah. So there's also the idea out there that this entire universe is inverted. If that is the case, then I would imagine that, yeah, let's say the governmental structure, or whatever you would like to call it, will be, yeah, dictatorial for the most part. There might be pockets of exemptions here and there, but I think in general, we cannot expect, when we go with that perspective, that yeah, anything good will come from our so-called alien saviors.
Yes, because the trend has always been, and I'm sure that this was not the first star system, the first world that this happened at. This kind of thing has transpired. The tendency seems to be towards more and more authoritarian, totalitarian control. See, one of the things that mainstream scientists have confused people with is this concept of entropy, where from their scheme of things, the bigger a construct is, the more disorganized it becomes. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. The bigger these constructs, real or artificial, become, the tendency is always for more centralized authority, centralized control. That's just the way it is. So I can see how China, Russia, and of course China and Russia and India and Iran, at the deepest, darkest level, they're controlled by these same Luciferian hybrid sewer scum anyway. Okay, that's a given on this planet. But just like if you look at the Anunnaki Chronicles, right? One faction trying to overcome or defeat another faction, or just to survive, right? Because in the intelligence world, survival is a big thing. If you can survive, then you can expand your empire. So survival is a big deal. They want they call it a multipolar world, but it's still going to be authoritarian, like we were talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just the nature of things. They just don't want it this hardcore way that it's being pushed by the West. They're going to have their own form. They just don't want it to be, and they're still going to do all the same things. They're still going to do human trafficking and still do all, because that element's not going to go away. It's still going to be there, but they just want to do it in their way, which doesn't involve flooding, your own country with, mass immigration and all that other stuff, right? They want to do things their own way, right? And as much as possible, keep their inhabitants somewhat pacified. And you're not going to keep them pacified if you just keep bringing in more and more illegal immigrants that cause problems. So, and again, China is the model for this, the model of authoritarian top-down control. So the fact that China has established links now with so many countries, right, and they basically own so many of these, excuse me, these Western countries. So many politicians are outright communist in the West. So, they have their own way of doing things, and it doesn't necessarily include going along with, what the Clintons and them want either, right? Because they see them as competitors. If you have a reptilian here and a reptilian here, well, this reptilian here, well, either of them will not want to be, they both want to be top dogs. They're not going to want to be, second tier, because if you're second tier, then you're vulnerable. And then a coalition could be formed to go against you, to get rid of you. It's just like this mob mafia kind of warfare, organized crime, right? The name of the game is always survival. So it's not necessarily good against evil. It's just, who get the bigger piece of the pie, so to speak,
Yeah. Yeah. And that, to me, it explains, we have a total disregard for humans right now, especially sometimes from governments. So I would say the decisions that they are making are here. Everybody knows it will fail. Everybody knows it will be a catastrophe. They do them anyhow. But as we know, one outcome of the Lyran Wars, in that system, when, as I said, it was basically a misunderstanding. The Lyrans thought we should know you better before we start trading and doing things. And the Dracos understood, no, you do not want to help us. And then this war broke out. And from that war stems this habit to eat humans, to see them as a food source. And if I look from that perspective, this influence, let's say the what covers the entire agenda, then I'm not surprised, that even governments go crazy and show a total disregard of for human life.
Well, I think that they want to engender as much, excuse me, loosh, as much high anxiety, as much chaos as possible. I mean, this is all part of the mass immigration and breaking down distribution change, cutting off the power supply, et cetera, et cetera. They want absolute chaos all across the board. Escape from New York scenarios everywhere, right? That's what they want. And another good thing in the recent past is uh, David Politis is coming out. Well, he will be coming out if he already hasn't done so, with a new documentary, Missing 411, the UFO connection, and that's going to be big. That's been a long time coming because a lot of us in this field have talked about this kind of thing. We talked about how for certain where certain alien races, subterranean races are concerned, species are concerned, the humans are simply a food source. The way that humans have factory farms, they have factory farms too. So I mean, we're talking huge factory farms, underground and off world. So for police to come out with that around this time, I think that's big too, because it shows that, there is some form of predation at work. Something is going on of supernatural, supranational, natural nature. It's not just these crazed leftist politicians around us. Something is motivating, driving them. But also there's this other issue that is interconnected, all these people disappearing in the forest and everything else, right? So I think that's really big for it to come out at this point in time, uh, to show that humans are not and have not been at the top of the food chain. And getting back to the point about how what's going on here is probably not unique. It may vary to some degree, right? The methodologies used on different star systems and what have you. But in general, this draconian, Orion, reptilian, and their assorted cosmic vassals and allies, and their never-ending attempts to assert control and dominion on the natives of various worlds, and also assert control and dominion over other spacefaring civilizations. That's been going on all along. This is just the latest example of it. But again, and thank you for bringing up, the cosmic aspect of this, because that's where the rubber meets the road for me. That's to me, that's where this is all playing out at the deepest, highest level, deepest and highest. And if we're going to defeat this, we have to recognize, excuse me, the source of this. It's just not these power mad Luciferian hybrids who do all these evil sordid things. It's what created them, what brought them into being, and how do they just happen to become the rulers, the plantation managers of this planet, right? And they all seem to have this Luciferian connection. All their ceremonies and all the evil things that they do, this transhumanist, it's where they've combined the high-tech transhuman AI with the ceremonial ritualistic stuff, right? It's really all one and the same, two sides of the same coin, right? Because this AI and the nanotech that they're striving to put into everybody, there's definitely a Luciferian aspect to it. Karen Kingston talked about how the ingredients will tend to put people into like a demonic realm, at the quantum level. And I would agree with that, right? It goes back to what I talked about, the Iboga people, videos of them seeing, fighting unseen things and dropping dead, right? So there's something going on beyond the earthly physical existence. And I would suggest that, what's happened to them, however, horrific it looks, that, oh, they died such a horrible way, that it didn't end there. I think that some other things have gone on after they shed this mortal coil, that they've ensnared these people, right? So that's what we're fighting, is the possibility that our consciousness can be trapped in this Tron-like existence forever. And our consciousnesses would just be the playthings of these beings forever, right? It's not just shedding our mortal coil. It goes beyond that, right?
Yeah. So, James, that was the first hour already, believe it or not. And yeah, thank you so much for your insights. And we will dive a little bit deeper into the alien agenda in the second hour. So, tell people where they can find you.
Oh, you can find me on thecosmicswitchboard.com. And you could also find me on Twitter and on Facebook. So please check out thecosmicswitchboard.com. We have 5+ years of archive shows, and you've been on as a guest on a number of occasions. We have some really good shows that are in our archives. So I encourage everyone to check it out.
Okay. So that was it, the public hour, and we will see the patrons on the other side.